Hey there, lovely soul, welcome back to Noah's Stories. Sometimes, the whispers in the dark can roar louder than any shout in a crowd. They drift through ballrooms, across dinner tables, down fluorescent-lit hallways, until they settle inside someone's soul, where they begin to take root as truth. For Julian Hale, once the golden name in architecture, those whispers didn't just brush past his ears, they echoed through every quiet corner of his mind. At 37, Julian had crafted structures the world stood in awe of, buildings that reached for the sky like metaphors of endless ambition. But behind the glass walls and flawless blueprints lived a man trapped inside nameless memories and relentless rumors. A public divorce, a wife who walked away claiming he couldn't give her a child, and a heart that had stopped believing in miracles. They said Julian was cold, detached, a genius imprisoned in his own gilded cage. They weren't wrong, at least not entirely. For a time, he believed them too. Until one May evening, when a painting pulled him to stillness amidst the noise. And then, a pair of eyes, deep, perceptive, knowing, began to rewrite the story he thought had already ended. This isn't just a love story. It's a resurrection, where whispers turn into light. Julian had never liked crowds. But that evening, out of a reluctant promise to Cam, his college roommate and oldest friend, he found himself at a tucked-away art gallery in Chicago's River North. Outside, rain drizzled like silver threads. Inside, the air buzzed with jazz music, murmured critiques, and the clink of wine glasses filled with curated charm. He planned to walk through, quickly, politely nod, and disappear, until a single painting made him stop. It was a large canvas, deep blue tangled with streaks of gold like light fighting its way through shadow. No clear shapes, no defined figures, but the emotion in it, raw and desperate, was unmistakable. Julian stood frozen, not by its technique, but by the way it made him feel. Seen. It's like hope struggling to survive, isn't it? A voice beside him said, soft as wind brushing the back of his neck. He turned. She wore a flowing, earth-toned dress. Her curls swept into a high twist, adorned with delicate gold pins that caught the gallery lights. But it was her eyes that held him, dark brown, unflinching, and full of quiet knowing. Or like pain learning how to forgive, Julian murmured. She smiled, a gentle, assured curve of the lips. I'm Amara. I curated this show. Julian shook her hand. Julian Hale. I'm not great at interpreting art, but I know when I feel something. Then you're feeling, Amara tilted her head, a playful gleam in her gaze. Art doesn't need to be understood, it only needs to be felt. And in that moment, amid clinking glasses and oil paintings catching soft light, something shifted. A new story, unspoken but certain, had just begun. After that first meeting, Julian left the gallery with Amara's slender business card tucked in his jacket pocket. But the impression she left behind was anything but slender. It followed him through the night, hidden behind the sound of rain tapping the windows, in the way the streetlights blurred across the windshield. It had been a long time since something, or someone, stirred his soul like that. Quiet, unfamiliar, and achingly real. He almost texted her that night, but then hesitated. It took him 2 more days to gather the courage to call. Amara, it's Julian Hale. A brief pause, and then her voice gentle with the unmistakable hint of a smile. I was starting to think you wouldn't call. Their first date was at a cozy little cafe in Old Town. A soft Saturday morning, sunlight slanting through the blinds, worn wooden tables, and jazz humming low in the background. They spoke as though they'd always known each other. About the painting that had stopped him, about the buildings Julian had designed, about how a space could sometimes listen back to the people inside it. Amara spoke of her childhood in Zimbabwe, of moving to the US at 13. In a new country, I learned to observe before I spoke. Maybe that's why art became my first language. Julian told her about sleepless nights over design boards, the emptiness that lingered even when every light in his penthouse glowed, and how he had built an empire of steel to avoid facing himself in the mirror. Their next meetings came like breezes: a rainy night exhibit, an old bookshop tucked between alleyways, a hand-knit scarf Amara brought him one morning because you look like someone who forgets to dress warm. No one dared name it love, but they both knew something was growing, softly, steadily. Not a wildfire, but something slow and certain. A warmth that reached corners of the heart long left untouched. And in the stillness of night, alone in his glass apartment, Julian began to feel something else. Fear. What if Amara found out the rumors were true? What if she saw the broken pieces he'd hidden beneath success and charm and walked away? The first time Amara came to Julian's apartment was on an early June evening when the sun still lingered past 8 p.m. and the cicadas hummed faintly from a distant park. His penthouse perched atop a riverside building, its walls made entirely of glass, offering a breathtaking view of the city. It was elegant, clean, and perfectly arranged, but carried the weight of quiet isolation, just like the man who lived in it. "This is where you live?" Amara asked, her gaze gliding over the rows of architectural models on floating shelves. "It feels more like a Julian Hale exhibit than a home." "Exactly," he replied with a faint smile. "This place is a shell, quiet, untouched. No one gets too close." "And no one stays," she murmured. He didn't respond. Instead, he poured them each a glass of wine, handing one to her as they stood before the massive windows. His eyes paused on their reflection, not because of appearance, but because closeness like this was rare for him. That night, they didn't speak much. They let the silences speak instead. Every touch, every embrace, every breath. It wasn't a night of conquest. It was surrender. To feeling, to past wounds, to something neither of them had dared to name. Later, with her head resting on his chest, her fingers drawing lazy circles on his skin, Amara asked softly, "Have you ever wondered, what if the rumors were true?" Julian froze. For a moment, he felt impossibly small. "I don't know," he breathed. "My ex-wife and I tried. For 2 years. Nothing ever happened. She said it was my fault, and eventually, everyone else believed that too." "And you?" she asked, looking straight at him. "Did you believe it?" For the first time in years, Julian didn't deflect. "I'm not sure," he said honestly. "After she left, I didn't have the strength to get tested. I thought, if the results proved her right, I wouldn't survive it." Amara didn't judge. She simply took his hand and placed it over her heart, where it beat steady and strong beneath her skin. "Then let's start here," she whispered. "Not with answers, with truth." 3 weeks after that night, the outside world finally breached the quiet haven Julian thought was untouchable. It started with a photograph. He and Amara had left a late jazz set in Hyde Park. His hand rested gently at the small of her back, a reflexive gesture. Her head was tilted up in laughter, the streetlight catching the exact second their closeness became something more. A tabloid ran the image the next morning under the biting headline, "Julian Hale, the infertile architect, trying to prove his manhood?" The article needed no facts, just friction. It rehashed his very public divorce, recycled old rumors, and painted Amara as a young, ambitious artist with unclear intentions. Amara saw the screenshot before breakfast, sent by a colleague. She didn't call Julian, but he knew, and he called her first. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, strained. "You once said this wouldn't touch us," she replied, soft but steady. "But it has. And now, I'm not sure what I've walked into." Julian was silent for a long time. Then, quietly, "I just wanted to keep you away from the darkest parts of my life." "But I don't need silence to feel safe, Julian," Amara said, heart aching with a truth too long ignored. "I need trust." And deep down, he knew that. In that moment, he realized that if he kept hiding, he would lose the only person who had ever truly seen him, not for what the headlines claimed, but for who he was in the quiet spaces beside her. He had never responded to the rumors publicly. But maybe, this time, it was time to speak. After that brief phone call, Julian said nothing the rest of the day. He almost typed a long message, almost called back, almost explained. But nothing he could say felt like enough, and beneath it all, he was afraid that whatever he said now might come too late. Amara, meanwhile, kept showing up. At work, in life, smiling, standing strong. But inside, her body had begun to bend beneath the quiet pressure mounting in her heart. The headlines, the co-workers' glances, the growing distance between her and Julian, it all gathered inside her like a storm, waiting for the right moment to break. The fatigue had been lingering for days, unexplained. Amara had chalked it up to stress, too little sleep, skipped meals, a head full of noise. But on that Wednesday morning, when she doubled over with nausea after brushing her teeth, something inside her clicked. She stood frozen in front of the mirror. Then, without a word to anyone, she stopped by a nearby pharmacy, bought a pregnancy test, and returned to the gallery. She didn't expect anything. But then, 2 lines appeared, clear, undeniable. Alone in the tiny changing room, her hands trembled. She took another test, and then one more. Each one confirmed the impossible. She sat down on a wooden bench, one hand resting against her belly, still flat, still quiet, but somehow full of life, of change, of something unexpected. That evening, she went to Julian's apartment without calling. He opened the door, surprise flashing in his eyes before softening. "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't answer. She simply handed him a test wrapped in a small handkerchief. Julian took it. For a few seconds, he didn't breathe. She didn't know if he'd be angry or afraid. But when he finally looked up, his eyes held something vast, like a skyline just before sunrise. "This is real?" She nodded. "I don't know how to feel yet. I just knew. I couldn't keep this from you." Julian gave a breathless laugh, half wonder, half fear. Then he stepped forward and placed his hand gently over her stomach. So soft, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. "We'll figure it out," he whispered. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Julian wasn't afraid of the whispers anymore. Because this was the loudest truth his heart had ever heard. A life beginning from what he thought had been broken. That night they said little, but the silence between them held more meaning than words ever could. In that silence, a promise was made, not spoken, but felt, that whatever this journey would become, they would face it together. After the night Amara handed him the pregnancy test, Julian didn't hesitate. No grand speech, no second guessing. The next morning, he arrived at her gallery with a simple request. "Come home with me, let me take care of you." Amara looked at him, surprised not by the words, but by the way he said them. There was no fear of headlines in his voice, no calculations, only a man trying to love with his actions. From that moment, everything changed. He cooked every day, even if his skills were limited. Simple chicken soup, oatmeal, hard-boiled eggs. He learned how to read her silences, noticed when her shoulders drooped just slightly, when her breath became shorter. He scheduled her appointments, drove her to every one, waited outside for hours just to be sure everything was still okay. He cleared out the small room at the end of the hallway and transformed it into a nursery. Cream-colored walls, soft lighting, tiny clothes folded with reverent care. Every item he picked out himself. One night, as they sat quietly on the balcony beneath a sky freckled with stars, Amara leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, "Have you ever doubted the baby?" Julian didn't answer immediately. He placed his hand over her belly, where life was slowly, steadily growing. "I spent so many years trapped in other people's doubt," he said softly. "It made me forget what it means to truly trust someone." He looked at her, then down at her stomach. "But you and this baby, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Amara didn't speak. She just reached for his hand and held it gently. Above them, the night sky held its breath, and beneath the stars, a quiet kind of beginning unfolded. Not loud, not perfect, but real, rooted in trust, watered by love, and glowing with the first light of something that finally felt like home. Time passed quietly and tenderly, mornings with Julian bringing tea to her bedside, evenings spent listening to their daughter's heartbeat through a tiny Doppler pressed gently to her belly. Somewhere in the softness of those days, they stopped counting the moments and simply lived them. Then one early autumn afternoon, Amara called him during a meeting. "I think it's happening." Julian left everything behind, laptop, phone, a room full of executives waiting for his signature, and raced to the hospital. Safi Hale, their daughter, arrived nearly a month early. Tiny, yes, but the moment she cried, sharp, strong, undeniable, Julian's world cracked open. He held her for the first time and wept, not from fear or sadness, but from something far greater, a miracle he once believed was never meant for him. Days later, after they'd all returned home, Amara carried a quiet weight in her heart. Not mistrust, only the need for certainty. Without telling Julian, she took Safi for a DNA test. The result arrived days later. They were father and daughter. That evening, after Safi had drifted to sleep, Amara placed the sealed envelope on the table in front of him. Julian opened it slowly. "Read every line, once, then again." "And then," he cried, not from surprise, but because something long lost had finally returned, his sense of truth, of belonging, of being enough. He walked to her, arms open, heart full, and pulled her close, as if gathering every broken piece and holding it back together. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me, for not walking away, and for her." Amara didn't speak. She simply leaned into him. Outside, the city lights flickered like stars that had fallen gently to earth. And in the warmth of that quiet room, two people, three heartbeats, finally beat in perfect unison. After the night Amara handed Julian the DNA results, something shifted. Quietly, without ceremony, his eyes became warmer, his arms held her longer, and when he looked at their daughter, it was no longer in awe or disbelief, but with a deep, grounded peace. As if, finally, he belonged somewhere. Time moved like breath. Sleepless nights rocking Safi to sleep, mornings with Amara resting against his shoulder, their daughter asleep in her lap. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Julian, that reality was the most sacred gift he'd ever known. A month later, Julian called a press conference not to defend nor to justify, but to step into the light, with the two people who gave him the courage to do so. To the same media that had once fueled countless rumors, he didn't deny, didn't explain. He simply smiled, holding his daughter in his arms, and said, "This is to Safi Hale, my daughter, the most beautiful thing I've ever had." The room went silent for a moment, but the most unexpected part hadn't come yet. Julian turned to Amara, who was standing quietly beside him, her eyes gentle. He reached into his coat pocket and took out a small box. And right there, in front of the entire world, he got down on one knee. "You don't have to be anyone else. Just be you, the one who brought light back into my life, the mother of my child, my home. Amara, will you marry me?" Amidst the sound of camera shutters and applause, Amara nodded, tears in her eyes but a smile on her lips. The wedding took place 1 week later, small, just those who truly loved them, nothing extravagant. But it was the most beautiful wedding, because it was built on trust, on time, and on the wounds they had overcome together. 2 months later, they left the apartment where it had all begun and moved into a small house by the sea, where there were no rumors, no cameras. Only waves, white sand, and wind that smelled like freedom. On the first morning in their new home, Julian held Safi while Amara carried a warm cup of coffee. The three of them stepped onto the beach. They stood there in silence, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The light fell across their faces, a man once broken, a woman once quietly strong, and a child who symbolized every new beginning. And so they began. No vows spoken, just each passing day together. And far behind them, the whispers that once haunted the dark faded into nothing but wind across the sea. And so they began. No grand vows, just each passing day together. Thank you for staying with us until the very last moment of this journey. If Julian and Amara's story found its way into your heart, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and send this video to someone who may still be walking through whispers of their own. We'll see you in the next video with more stories told through love, healing, and the quiet belief that true love doesn't have to shout, it only needs to be real.